Hi, everybody. You're tuned in to Where Waters Meet, a podcast featuring discussions on fly fishing, art, all things outdoors with a conservation focus. All right, guys, it's Alex with Where Waters Meet podcast, and I'm here with our guest today, Mike Jones, and I'm really excited to have you here.
I'm excited to be here. Yeah. I'm really glad you're getting into this, Alex, because you have a voice that's interesting to listen to, and you have great stories, and you have great vision, and I think it's going to translate with the audience really well. And I love that you're doing a video podcast.
Hey,
yeah,
I appreciate it. I thought of you immediately when I started this.
oh, good.
I did, and I thought I got to get Mike on here because you got a pleasant way, and your podcast, which is Flyline, is awesome, and you're doing awesome things
Thanks.
over there, and really your guests have been pretty awesome.
Yeah, that's well. It started as a brainchild about 3 years ago, and I just was listening to other podcasts and didn't feel like I was connecting. I wasn't getting connected to what I was hearing. Is what I'm trying to say. And I think what I really wanted to do is I really wanted to like get the backstory behind people that everybody knew. You take someone like Macaulay Lord from LL Bean, kind of a household name. Everybody knows him, but they don't realize that he, grew up in Kentucky, and a little bit about his childhood. Just things like that. Everyone has a different facet to who they really are.
Yeah.
And of course, in the process of taking on different interviews and meeting different people, I learned a whole lot about people that I thought I knew, that there were aspects to their life that I didn't know much about.
Well, I think it's amazing and testament to the people that you do know that you get the guests that you get on there. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. I feel very lucky because I try to make the podcast almost exclusively about them. I don't want to talk much about me, but there's so many relatable things that I have in common with most of the guests. I either know them, probably about 90% of the time I knew them or have been introduced to them in advance, so that helps a lot for, making for an interesting conversation. But there's times where I'll have, like Randy Spencer from down east. He's a singing fishing guide.
Yeah.
And I'd never met him before. So we did a virtual podcast, which I don't do those anymore. I do in person now because I think it really adds, and you'll have to agree to that.
Yeah. I've had a few people already say, well, we ought to tune in and you can do like the virtual thing, but I don't know. It's hard. In-person conversation and dialogue is definitely easier for me. I mean, personally.
What I found was there was buffering. So I didn't want to be talking over somebody, and I didn't want there to be these big lags because the internet only works so fast. I have control over my speed, but I don't have control over your speed. And so that's why we decided to do it in person.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it works.
Yeah.
It does take a lot more time because I have to get in the car and drive to Rangeley and yeah.
The state of Maine isn't little.
Let's talk about how we met.
Yeah. So I met Mike through a friend who met him at a gas station, and he said that he had a drift boat that he might want to sell. And that friend knew that I was in the market, so he connected us. And that's where it kind of like started. Yeah. And so I went and looked at a Hyde Pro Series XL that Mike had for sale, and I was extremely excited. Drift boats are not easy to acquire, which we'll talk about that even more later in the episode, in the state of Maine. And I was graduating from a 13-foot NRS raft.
I remember.
To a drift boat.
Yeah.
And
for your family.
Yeah, exactly, because it's just very segmented with the raft. You have your front fisherman, you have your rower, then you have your back, fisherman, and like it was just hard for the kids getting around. So yeah, like and you had the 3/4 bench, so you had walk around space with the seat pedestals front and back, so you didn't have benches to climb over, and it was perfect.
I call it a hurdling field.
Yeah, and I don't even need to do that. So
no, I think when I was young, it didn't matter to step over a seat box, but as guiding for over 30 years, very often you have someone who's long in the tooth. They're not agile anymore, and it's time to move someone from the back of the boat to the front of the boat because that's what you do.
Yeah.
And the walkthrough design is just far superior. That's one of the reasons I went away from Clackacraft, because I was on their pro staff for a long time. And I kept saying to them, "You guys, I think wasn't Boulder Boat Works, but who's the guy? Jason Cahoon. Am I saying that correct?
Yeah, 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 and he's got those beautiful wooden boat designs
Yeah,
now.
I mean, totally out of my price. I mean, you could
Yeah,
spend $40,000 on one of those
yeah,
boats, but the thing he was getting right was the walkthrough design,
yeah,
and just the way it made sense to me from a guiding perspective, and Clackacraft wouldn't do it.
yeah,
So I was actually with Danny Legier from the Main Guide Fly Shop on a trip in his boat, which was a Hyde, and I was rowing it, and I was thinking, wow, this is really light,
mm,
and I love the walkthrough design, and I just jumped ship. I just started buying hides,
yeah,
and so I still have a hide now. You bought one of my first hides that I got when I went back to hide, and then I got another
yeah.
one. That one's on the San Juan River now.
I love it. It's great. It's awesome. But before we're gonna dive down this, we're gonna get out of control talking about drift boats pretty soon.
Okay.
So, but before we dive down there, I just thought it'd be good if you'd give a little recap of like where you grew up, kind of your
Oh yeah.
background on rivers,
Yeah.
and how you became a registered Maine guide and how long you've been doing that.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, well, I'll try to compress it down. But I'm a second generation Master Maine guide. So my father was a Master Maine guide. I grew up in Mount Vernon, which is just outside of Augusta, the capital of Maine. And I got my guide's license when I was 18. So almost immediately when I was allowed to do it. And my first guide license was a whitewater rafting guide's license. So I'm big into whitewater.
Mhm.
And then I got injured in a kayaking incident and blew out my shoulder. And that forced me out of whitewater and had to look in other directions. And I'd always seen this other guide on the river, John McLeod, who was really the first person to ever have a drift boat in the state of Maine. And John had a wooden drift boat and then he had a fiberglass drift boat. And that company that made that boat is no longer in business. So I ended up getting into fly fish guiding and then subsequently getting into drift boat guiding with fly fishermen in Maine on the Kennebec mostly at that
Mhm.
point and the Penobscot, the West Branch. And now I spend almost all my time on the Androscoggin and the Middle Kennebec.
How old were you when you made that transition with your shoulder injury?
96, between 96 and 98. I got my first drift boat in 98.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Okay, so you're 27 years deep
Yeah.
into drift boats.
Yeah. I've had 21 drift boats. You own one of them. Yeah. But and it was like, there's a lot of sea captains that are like sponsored by Yamaha.
Yeah.
And all they have to do is give Yamaha $6,000 for otherwise $15,000 outboard motor,
Mhm.
use it for a year or two, and then they can sell it and then give Yamaha $6,000 more. And that's kind of what I was doing. I was in the guide program, so they were giving me really good pricing on brand new drift boats. So why not? I like to smell the new fiberglass.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and of course there were changes in evolution, and I was part of some of that evolution for like Clackacraft. They had the Gulfstream series
Yeah.
and the tunnel hull.
Yeah.
The tunnel hole wasn't my idea, but the Gulfstream,
Yeah.
the golf ball
The
dimples on the
golf ball
bottom.
dimple on
Yeah,
the
I
bottom.
drew that on the back of a manila folder at a trade show and
Yeah.
handed it to the guys at Clackacraft, and they went and reproduced it. But as I've said before, if you've ever heard me talk about this, it turns out that it doesn't do anything.
I did. I listened to your podcast when you talked about that. And you were
Yeah.
saying, yeah, I mean, the water would have to be really
Have to go in about 80 miles an hour,
yeah.
and you're not going to drift boat an 80-mile-an-hour current.
I hope not.
Yeah. So, but yeah, so there's just been a lot of fun with drift boats. Drift boats are really kind of their origin and the refinement came from out west,
Mhm.
but they're absolutely ideal for these, freestone and tailwater rivers that we have in the Northeast.
Yeah.
Gravel bars, get out, use it as a taxi. I mean, how many times do you get out of the boat and fish with your waders all the time, right?
Yeah.
And I even have some clients that hire me that say, I don't really want to fish out of the boat. I want to just go down the river and
And get out.
get out and do some wade fishing. And of course, everything's there. You've got the lunch and the cooler.
Yeah.
And all your solutions are just a few feet away from you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I like about it.
I call them like the Lamborghinis of the river is
Yeah.
what, because it's like I had a raft and it was the Jeep of the river.
Yeah.
It can do everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I mean you could argue obviously, yeah, if you're in whitewater, it's better in that situation. But like when you get into a drift boat, it just feels like a sports car for like a trout river.
Yeah, and I still use rafts. I have a flat raft with
Yeah.
leaning posts and all that, and I use that where there's not a put in or a good takeout, because a drift boat you can slide over guardrails and down gravel banks, but it's awfully difficult to do the reverse process.
Yeah.
I have a winch on my truck that I can pull it up places, but that's not really, fun to do with clients,
No.
So I like to use, fish the sections of rivers that you do
Mm.
where there's a lot of water, maybe 10 miles of river that you can float. And even if there's another boat there, you can kind of spread out.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. I'd second that for sure.
Yeah.
And before we do get further into the drift boat conversation, and thanks for kind of sharing your
Thank
background,
you. Yeah.
Mike. And
Yeah.
um, it's kind of neat. Mike kind of surprised me today, and he brought in some art that he is pursuing, which is different than my art,
Yeah. But similar.
but similar.
Yeah.
Yeah, same subject matter, and painting is involved. But I have so much respect for people that do this. But I'm gonna grab some of
Oh,
these,
yeah. Go ahead.
and we'll kind of have a reveal in front of the
Okay. I love it.
camera here. So this is a cutthroat.
Yeah, this is a 17-inch West Slope cutthroat. It's not finished. Neither of these two fish that you'll see are finished. There's still details missing, but um, they're going to get 5 coats of lacquer when they're done. So it'll look wet. It'll look real. And a cutthroat is a really unique fish in that it has all this heavy spotting on the back and then hardly any on the front, usually some rainbow spots on the head. And, the fins are kind of bland on a
Mhm.
cutthroat. So that's what I did there. And I'm doing apprentice work, so I'm working under the wing of a world renowned fish carver that has learned all the tricks over his entire career and is willing to share them with me because if he doesn't, that art form will not get passed along to another generation.
Yeah.
And so I actually carved fish for many years and got out of it because I got really frustrated. I'd spend a month on a fish, and I couldn't imagine if you did the math, that could be a profitable business because I'd
Mhm.
have to charge $6,000 for a 20-inch brook trout because I wasn't happy with how it looked.
Right.
So who I'm working with is really teaching me the shortcuts, and this is a number of rays on this fin. The head needs to look like this. The eyeball needs to be pointing in this direction. And there's a lot of little tricks that, I like to say this, Alex. I've touched thousands of brook trout
Mm.
and trout for 8 seconds.
Yeah.
So you don't really get to really, I can't remember when I killed a trout.
Well, and the thing too is like, I mean, when did you start taking photos too?
Oh, I've been a photographer
Yeah.
I
But I
studied
mean,
photography. That's what I studied.
it's like, but carving before was even, they've been doing it forever, but
Oh,
it's like, to have the assistance of the photos, it was like,
oh yeah.
it's unbelievable what they're doing. But I have so much respect for this. I mean, I gotta say the proportions on this are amazing. And I feel like that would be the terrifying part for me with carving,
Right.
is I feel like I also do like, well, some of my stuff over here, like it's I have an aspect of it that's like the head
Can I?
or a fin. But like when you do this, there really isn't very much like room for error as far as if the dorsal is placed too far back or too far forward or if it's too
Right.
large. I mean, there's so many factors when you're dealing with a 3D.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. So that's exactly what I'm being taught. Is where these things are, and that fin looks too small. That one looks like it's in the wrong place.
Yeah.
And yeah, so there's a lot to talk about. I'm not going to give a lot of it away here, but knowing exactly where the adipose fin is in relation to the anal fin, and all fish are different.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll get a big brook trout that'll have a really big pectoral fin, and then the next one you see will not.
Yeah.
And the spots in the same pool could be very different from
Very
two different fish.
brook trout have a huge level of variability with like head structure.
Totally.
It's
Yeah.
like I'm gonna actually grab your brook trout
Yeah.
here.
Yep.
This is
Yeah, so this is a 23-inch brook trout that I caught in Labrador this summer when I went to Mackenzie River Lodge and got it on a Goddard caddis.
oh man, that's one of my favorite dries.
Mine too. Yeah, I really love it. It made me excited when I saw that there was a big,
Yeah.
thick, fat caddis hatch going off. And so yeah, this is again a fish in progress. It's not completed. There's no white tuxedo lines on on the fins yet, and there will be. And then I still have to do the black vermiculations on the dorsal fin, and then 5 coats of lacquer. And then every time if you do this, you're never satisfied. Do you agree with that, Alex?
I do.
Yeah, you walk into the room after you haven't seen it for a day, and you go, "Oh, I don't like that eye,"
Yeah.
or whatever it is that you
And
don't
it's
like.
great. It's great coming back to things too. Like I will say from a painting standpoint, like I have so much respect for people that will do that. They do a one setting painting. And I think I've even commented. My mother was like that a lot. She'd get consumed in paint for 20 hours.
Right.
But like I love leaving, and then you come back and there's just stuff that does pop up that it didn't really look that bad when you were doing it, and then you look at it and you're like, oh, like you said, eye placement would be one. I might walk in and be like, oh wow, that eye is off a little bit, gonna have to fix that.
Yeah, you have an eye for it. I can tell just because of the quality of your art, and it's something that I don't have quite the same level of being able to identify exactly the mistakes, but I know when I'm not seeing what I want to see.
Yeah.
And so it's really helpful to be working with someone who's been doing it for so long that they recognize a mistake in a second,
Yeah.
and they're not shy to point it out.
Yeah.
And that really helps.
Well,
You have to have thick skin to do this sort of thing. You have to be able to walk away and say, I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it right.
yeah.
So,
I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Like I said, the level of respect though, it's kind of crazy because like this isn't just painting. You know what I
oh,
mean?
no,
It's
no.
like this isn't just painting. You have to get the shape, you have to learn how to carve, you got to, set fins, and you got to do all this stuff, and this looks amazing. So the painting that you do on this though, it looks like is this a combination of airbrushing and um
Hand brush.
hand brush?
Yep. It's
Is it?
all acrylic.
Okay.
So I use airbrush paints for the airbrush part of it.
Yeah.
And, you could do a YouTube video on just what goes into painting one of these things, but you know how complex a brook trout is in terms of all of
Oh,
its features that,
yeah.
I mean, as an example, the vermiculations on the back are not the same. They're almost opposite. Right? They
Mhm.
change. So it's
Mhm.
it's black lines on the dorsal fin where it's almost like a mustard,
Yeah.
or um, what's the art color that I'm thinking of that is this color? Alex.
Probably raw sienna.
Raw sienna.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. And it just varies. The red is not always the same, as you mentioned earlier.
It
It
is
can
it
vary.
is not.
I didn't want to make this one fire engine.
Yeah.
I didn't want to make it orange, 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 because I wanted it to be. It was caught more in the middle of the summer,
Yeah.
and of course up there, they still color up quite well in the middle of the summer, but
Yeah.
not like they do at the end.
Yeah.
Like, you think of the McGalloway brook trout and the Rapid River brook trout in September, late September, they're just tuxedoed,
Yeah.
tuxedoed right up for
Yeah.
the dance.
Yeah, they're ready to go.
So this one's a little more tuned down, just because I thought it might be a better way to do it.
I think it's amazing. I think in the colors, even on the back, something that I struggle with painting brook trout is like in your mind you think that they're like this olive green. You know what I mean? But there's a high level of variability, and there's blues in there as
Oh, yeah.
well. And like and some fish, depending on like like a midsummer female is definitely more blue than
And the camera angle that the photo is taken from, I mean, you made a reference earlier about utilizing reference photography.
yeah.
And I do tons of that. And of course, the internet has a million. You can, if you want to look for stripes on the tail of a brook trout, there's
Yeah.
25 images on
Yeah.
on the internet to steal from, or to just get an inspiration from. So, but again, the camera angle, you might look at an Atlantic salmon from above looking down, and because of the sunlight hitting it, it looks very chrome. And then you just simply move the photographer over to the other side, and
Yeah.
it looks like a green, bronzy color.
Yeah.
So you can't get caught up in what
Yeah.
the image.
The reflection it can be debilitating at times, and like but with salmon, like you were saying though, like I mean their cheeks are that's the amazing part for me. You know what I mean? Like, and I can't imagine actually painting one. Like, I imagine it's probably the same level of difficulty as when I paint one on a canvas. I really struggle with trying to capture that reflection with a salmon. They end up sometimes looking flat, you know what I mean? As opposed to like, You have to really know where you want to build out with that bright, bright, bright color to begin with, to get that effect, because otherwise it just gets real muddy.
You paint in oil?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're able to pull that silver off a little easier with oil than you can with acrylic.
Yeah.
So I'll have to use true, what you would call silver, right,
Yeah.
as a paint, and be daring with it. When I'm
Yeah.
talking about for doing like Atlantic or
Yeah.
landlocked salmon, because otherwise it just won't. It'll look gray.
It'll look gray.
And there's also there's some tricks. I don't want to give too much away here, Alex, but you notice that fish has scales on it?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
So there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. A lot of guys carve them in or burn them in.
Hmm.
Okay. But with an Atlantic salmon or with a landlocked salmon, you really do need to make each what am I trying?
Scale.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
I need to make each scale individually by
Yeah.
carving it in and then painting it, and then each scale gets several layers of paint.
Right.
Blue, silver, maybe a little bit of yellow.
Yeah.
Depending on where you are on the fish, you might add some pink in there. You might add, different things. So it's truly art. And so to answer your question, airbrush first, hand paint second,
Yeah.
and then you'll see that I airbrushed again to blend it because the hand paint is just too hard.
It looks great, and I love the scaling on this. And I think I know probably what you use for a trick. But what's nice is char.
Yeah,
They have such small, smooth scales. It's
tiny.
almost like skin-like.
Yep.
And I'm struggling with the same thing with this brook trout, which isn't finished on the back wall, where I've achieved what I want for a layout in the skin section of it, where the scaling would be, kind of behind the gill plate. And I am struggling as to if I want to have very small defined scaling, or if I want to leave it as is and capture just kind of the smooth effect of it. And so I don't know what I'm going to do yet.
I have no advice for you because I think it looks great the way it is. Yeah, it's fantastic. I love the eyeball. I like how you have the transition of the green across the back to give the sense of depth, and meaning depth like the top of the back is going to be darker,
Yeah.
and then as it rolls down, it's going to get lighter to show the contour of the
Yeah.
fish. And you've captured that there too. And you always have a great way of capturing the reflection of the sunlight and the daylight off from every fish. You never avoid that when you do it. I'm talking about you.
Oh, I'm excited about this one because I'm actually going to try a little bit of a different technique, and I'm going to do a little bit of glazing.
Sure.
And I'm going to see. I don't typically do that to kind of capture reflection, but I'm gonna see how that goes. But
So you thought the podcast was going to be about drift boating, and it turned into art.
I know we've gone down this like
rabbit hole, as we like to say, right?
It's okay. I get off on tangents all the time, and art is always a good one to go down. You never, shy away from that.
Well, let's go back to drift boats.
Yeah.
So one of the things that I ended up doing over time and out of necessity was teaching people how to use them.
Mhm.
So teaching rowing schools and that sort of thing. Because as you know, it's like driving a forklift. Everything's counterintuitive. You would think that if you want to go over to the left-hand shore, you'd point the bow to the left and push forward. Well, that you never row forward in a drift boat.
No, you're gonna hit whatever you're trying to get away from twice as fast.
Yeah. So the whole idea, and you're going twice as fast. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. So
Yeah.
you're just going at your problem faster.
Yeah.
It's like hitting the accelerator going into a red light.
You can't do anything.
So you turn the anchor or the back of the boat in the direction you want to travel and back row, and that way you're not losing any river, right? So
Yeah.
those are all the things that are fun to teach people, because to buy a drift boat is one thing, but then to learn how to actually effectively catch fish by rowing it and guiding out of it, that's a completely different topic.
Were
altogether.
you teaching that mostly on the Kennebec at
You know-
the time, or were you kind of like mobile?
Both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did them on the Sandy
Okay.
in Farmington.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the Sandy was great because we could put in above town and just float back down into town. And there's a couple of really nice, gravel bar riffles and stuff like that. Nothing that's going to really scare the heck out of you. And there's a
Right.
few rocks to avoid, and definitely some cut banks that you want to point the nose at and row away from.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of, you got to learn how to walk before you learn how to run. And running in Maine is running parts of the Penobscot and the East Outlet. That's serious stuff. That's taking, people have died there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but having the ability, having the background in kayaking was everything. And some of the guides that I've worked with and still work with are ex whitewater guides, and they can see danger from a mile away.
Yeah.
And some other people don't understand how dangerous water is. Really dangerous.
It's very dangerous. We started going when my kids were really little. And so that was like a fear of mine. So I kind
Mhm.
of tried to educate myself quick. It was great that I learned in a raft as opposed to a hard boat to
Let,
begin
let's
with.
talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, because it was, yeah, I mean, I think they're a great beginner tool. And then there's, as you touched on earlier, really amazing niches that you use them in. And that's how I've always used them, like hard put-ins, hard
Yes.
takeouts, and really, really rough going too. I mean, if you are floating in whitewater type stuff, or you're going to encounter that. I mean, yeah, I mean, like, and over here we don't really have that on the Andro where we're on the river. I mean, I think they have what they say is a class 2 within the stretches that I like am in, but
What would it be more specific?
of
What section?
I think they say that the Bear River Rips is a class 2.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I mean you can skirt around it and not. Maybe if you went through the middle of it, yeah. But
And do you go down to Canton Dixfield at all?
yeah.
Yeah. So, that section, I call it Paradise City, but basically just before you start to get into sight of where you can see the arched bridge, you've got the pylons, and then you go about
Yep.
maybe half mile upstream from there. You got some stuff to avoid,
Yeah.
especially in low water. That's the other thing that's neat about drift boats is
Yeah.
high water is easy. There's nothing to hit, right? Low water is when it gets serious. You're going to
Yeah.
have all these rocks and gravel bars, and you may not be able to get any purchase on your oars,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think it becomes more challenging.
Yeah. And yeah, we could talk about oars too. I mean, oars are a big thing when it comes to that, but yeah, so like the evolution of, well, like, so when you did start, so you were doing your school, and but did you start out rowing clacka crafts as your first hard boat of choice, or did you start in a hide?
It started in high.
You started in a hide.
Yeah, so that's a fun story. Just I like history, so that's fun. We were selling Outcast pontoon boats,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so we were exclusive. We were the exclusive dealer for Outcast in the Northeast. And I'm talking about Bob Dion and I at Aardvark Outfitters in Farmington. This is a fly shop that doesn't exist anymore.
Hmm.
And we were down at the Somerset, New Jersey fly fishing show, and we were selling pontoon boats directly across from Lemoyne Hyde and Matt Hyde, who's his oldest son. And so they watched us for 3 days in the grind, working the sail,
Hmm.
doing it. And as we were breaking down the show, the two of them came over and said, "You guys should think about selling drift boats in the Northeast because we don't have anybody doing it." So they gave us a sweet deal on a brand new 1998 Hyde, and that was the first. So I had a Ferrari,
Yeah.
you know, but it wasn't a Ferrari. It was kind of like the Yugo. They had started putting the raised floors in using construction adhesive.
I've heard about the horror stories
Yeah,
of this. Yeah.
98 and 99 were the years you wanted to stay away from the Hyde boats.
Yeah.
And it's not the river that kills a boat, it's the dirt road and the trailer that kills
Hmm.
the boat. So if there's a weak point somewhere and you're going down that pothole filled road, like the Golden Road,
Yeah.
the boat starts to delaminate from the inside. And so they they were kind of at a crossroads because they have a lifetime warranty on their boat.
Right.
And all of a sudden they were getting a lot of calls back. And at that time, their head sales guy was a guy named Jack Parker for Hyde, jumped ship and went to work for Clackacraft. And he called me directly and said, "I think you should jump on this Clackacraft brand where they have this tunnel hull. They're really tough.
Mm.
Everything's glassed in." I could see no reason to stay where I was.
Yeah.
So then I stayed with Clackacraft for a long time. And they still make a superior boat. I mean, if you want the international harvester of drift boats, they
Yeah.
are bomber. I mean,
Yeah.
they're really, really well constructed.
Yeah, I like some of their new models that they've come out with in, well, not that recent years now, but like I have yet to get in an Eddy. But I would like to row one of those because I think it's kind of a little bit like the shape is a little along the Pro Series XL, like what we row, as far as it does have a flat spot in the middle.
Yeah.
And like it's kind of a hybrid skiff drift boat, so to speak,
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
definitely.
I'd like to try one of those out. I love the way my boat rows.
Hmm.
And I definitely would say rowing other boats that are more traditional McKinsey style that have, the full rocker, so to speak, like um I think that they don't do as well in the wind. You know what I mean? Like they kind of spin. It's almost like a basketball. They can kind of like, they're great as far as if you need maneuverability within like white water.
That's exactly what they're designed for,
Right.
but that's not what we're using them for.
No.
Um, the thing that okay, so a rocker, just for the listening audience, the rocker is just like the rocker on a rocking chair, and it's a true curve that never stops,
Yep.
right? But the rocker on some of the modern boats that we use, both you and I, it comes down, it goes flat for maybe 4 or 5 feet, and
Hmm.
it's flat widthwise as
It
well.
is. Yeah. You got straight chines at that point.
So what ends up happening is the boat doesn't deflect down into the water as deep by virtue of that flat surface,
Yeah.
where the rockered boat will. But if you're going through a heavy wave train, the rocker boat will perform better.
Hmm.
But I'm not going through a lot of heavy wave trains.
I'm certainly not here,
No.
and I encounter a lot of wind,
Yep.
and the boat performs better in that. And also, as you know, there's so many riffle habitat areas, and then you've got pools and you have runs, but there's also some deadwater areas.
Yep.
And there's times where, I'm pushing, and just kind of forward rowing through those and having that flat
Yeah.
spot. The boats skate a little bit better.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And I also feel like they track better. Having those straight chines along that flat section of the boat, like what you were explaining, I feel like they track better. And also when you do go to back row or back ferry,
Yeah.
like you were explaining, where you point the nose, towards the object you're trying to avoid, basically, and
And pull away
and
from it.
right, and you turn the butt,
Yeah.
um, I feel like having that straight line. There's times in certain currents that you get the boat to settle in, and you can kind of row, and you can even just let off, and you still kind of still track across the river.
100%. The analogy. So clackcraft boats, if you were to look at the chine profile, where the side of the boat hits the bottom of the boat, they're rounded by design. If you take a rounded object, it's going to handle impact a lot better.
Hmm.
But you look at your boat and my boat that I run now, the hide has a real, I mean, it's a sharp chine,
It's a
right?
sharp
And we can
chine.
damage it if we're not careful.
Yeah.
But it's like having sharp skis or putting a tune on your snowboard. When you like, I'm just going to repeat what you just said, which is if you're rowing across a current and you just stop rowing, it just maintains that angle. That
Yeah.
ferry angle is what we call it,
Yeah.
cutting across the current, because literally the water coming down the river is hitting a hard surface that it can influence rather than a round surface. And then of course that's compounded 10 times when you look at the tubes of a raft. That's why rafts are so forgiving. You can pull out of a hard eddy line and you're probably not going to flip over where with a drift boat
Yeah.
or right.
Yeah. It's going to dig in.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of talking. Sorry.
So what about if you take that design though, that or the two designs that we're talking about, and I do know that, Clackacraft is known for their rounded chines and
Yeah.
the fear no rock,
Yeah.
and everybody's like, yeah, they definitely take a rock pretty good. But crab crawling.
Yeah.
So I have never rode a clack with the rounded edges. Do you feel they crab crawl better
No.
than a hide? No.
No. Um, for crab, what Alex is describing is that when you're going down the river and you're basically fishing along a shoreline and you want to basically keep the boat pitched so that both the guy in the back and the guy in the front can throw ahead.
Yeah.
Okay. If conversely, if you pointed it the other direction, the guy in the back would be shut down. He would
Right.
have nowhere
Right.
to go.
Trying to maintain that perfect angle for
S-
everyone.
So what you do is you're basically putting your left oar in the water behind you, and then you take your other oar and you put your blade down almost to the bow of the boat. And I put the end of my hand on the end of the oar handle,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm literally putting it in the water and pushing it over while I'm back rowing this way. And what it allows me to do is not go crashing into the shoreline. This is pretty technical stuff, but
Yeah.
it's, I mean,
Yeah.
since you brought it up, that's what it
Yeah,
is.
no, I'm glad that you explained it. You did a much better
Eh,
job of explaining it than I would.
But where I was going with that is a clackacraft versus a hide.
Mm.
If you think about a clackacraft, if you look at one from behind, if you're following one, they have a lot of flair, right?
Yeah.
Where the hide is a little more like this. Okay, same thing with like Boulder Boat Works. All the major companies are a little more like this and a little bit less like that. The
Hmm.
only other company that's like Clackacraft is Lavero, and they're not in business anymore.
Yep.
But they're both that Western style
Yep.
Oregon type drift boat. So no, they don't crab walk well because the oar locks are so far away that it's not as conducive as the boats that we have.
It's now what length oar do you use in yours?
Well, my boat's a little bit smaller than the boat that you have,
Yeah.
so I have 9 footers now. Are you
Yeah.
running 9.5?
I'm running nine and a
Yeah,
half. There's times where because I'm tall,
yeah,
I do wish that my oar locks were 3 inches higher because of my height.
yeah.
I've gotten very used to it, but that being said, what I love about my boat compared to the other boats that I've rode is like how efficient it is. Like I'm right here. It's super efficient. I don't have to have as much movement.
No,
And when you do go to crab crawl, like you said, and you're cuffing that water under one side of the boat and maintaining that angle and you're moving the boat this way across the river as opposed to having to turn it to move it.
exactly.
And so if your guys have a good casting angle, you can maintain that by doing that crab crawl. But it is hard to do. It's a lot like rubbing your stomach in the top of your head is the way that I've had it described to me before by people trying to do it.
Right. There's another thing I want you to think about that is kind of an extension of that, and this is getting technical for people that don't row drift boats. But let's say you're going down the river and you have that the crab crawl placement of your oar out like this,
Hmm.
and you're going through some pretty quick water, and there's a rock with an eddy behind it. Okay, you just insert that blade right into that eddy water, and it'll pull you right into the eddy right behind the rock. Think about it.
It's like a rudder. You just
Yeah, it's in kayaking or canoeing, it's called a dufek turn, which is reaching out with the backside of the paddle. You see the slalom kayakers
yeah,
will do that. And then the whitewater guys, the guy in the bow will reach right over and grab some of that eddy water on the side to really get the boat to come in.
yeah.
You can do that with a drift boat using the crab crawl. Think about it.
You're blowing my mind now.
No, it's fun. It's fun. We could talk about this all
I'm
day
gonna
long.
I'm gonna I'm gonna have to try that. There's actually a lot of places that I like to tuck in.
Yep. And you can do it quietly. So you're not
Yeah.
sitting there slamming and banging.
And that's how I do. I come down now and I
Yeah.
really quickly try to tuck the back end of the boat up in there, and I usually do through muscle,
Yeah.
and then I drop my anchor.
Yep.
But I'm gonna have to try that. I like that. I like that. Yeah. So we could talk about this forever, but what I am excited also to talk about is Mike has this new venture that he's in the beginning stages, which is that's the fun part.
It is.
That's the fun part with any business,
Yep.
is the beginning. But he is currently developing two different models,
Yep.
correct?
Of drift boats.
Of drift boats,
Yep.
and they're going to be available on the East Coast, or well, anywhere, but they're being manufactured. They're going to be manufactured
Made in New England.
yeah.
Made in New England by a reputable marine, boat manufacturer
Mm.
to be named in the future. We're really in the prototype stages right now. We're, basically building molds, and I'm working with them. I go down about every 2 weeks and spend a full day just looking at lines of the boats. And this needs, like you just said, the oar locks need to be higher.
Yeah.
You'd only know that if you had spent a great part of your life rowing a drift boat.
Right.
There's things that just don't come to people naturally, just like me learning from another artist how to carve fish. This guy who knows how to lay glass and does it really well and can use infusion and all sorts of different stuff, just doesn't really know what the modern drift boat looks like. So what we've
Yeah.
done, we'll use some names now. Okay, so I think that what's the term, Alex? You say is the greatest form of flattery. Copying somebody.
Yeah.
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 How's the saying go? Do you remember?
I think that's basically
Yeah,
it. It's
basically,
like,
yeah.
the largest form of flattery is being copied or yeah.
So there's aspects of all of the drift boat manufacturers out there right now that every one of them, like there's one company that's got the best rod, rack for storage.
Mm-hmm.
There's a company that has great durability. Clackacraft leads the industry in terms of,
Mhm.
tough boats. Hyde makes really, really nice boats in terms of the layout on the inside
Yeah.
and the way that they do like the floor construction.
There's
Where the,
that is definitely, I would say, like, yeah, if you go from between a Clacka and a Hyde, like the floor system is a big strong point with Hyde for sure. You aren't in the water all day.
no. And
You know.
they're putting out so many boats in terms of their production volume that their fit and finish is really good.
Mm,
They've got a team of people, so that's the hard thing for us to overcome is, you don't want to create a boat that's kind of crude, but also the angle that we're trying to take on it is, have you priced a new drift boat lately?
oh, it's crazy. Yeah, there was somebody got a hide and it was like 16,000
Yep.
um get it over here. And I know like East Cape,
Yeah.
the saltwater skiff company
Out of,
out of Orlando, they came out with a very interesting boat called the Drift,
yep.
and they're $20,000.
Yes. Yeah, they are. So if you're a guide, do you know how much guiding you're going to have to do to pay for a $20,000 drift boat?
Yeah, I mean
Uh,
that's like you better hope that that boat lasts a very long time.
We paid $3,600 for our first drift boat
Yeah,
back in '98, and now I mean, you can't even buy a used wooden one for 30. You could
yeah.
probably buy a used wooden one.
I'm just curious. Back in '98, what was a full guided trip in a drift boat? What did that cost somebody?
$300.
$300. Yeah. So if you take inflation,
Yeah.
like if you were making, so 3,600 and $300, and you're buying a $16,000 drift boat or $20,000 drift boat, I
Yeah.
mean, you should be making like $2,000 a day.
It doesn't work like
It
that.
doesn't work like that.
Yeah, there's definitely a threshold that you can charge, and you go to some places and they do charge $800 a day for guiding.
Mm,
If you went to especially some of the tropical destinations, but there's enough competition in Maine that we all have to kind of stay in check.
yeah.
And by that I mean our pricing has to be consistent within $50, I think.
Yeah.
What are you going to charge this year?
495
Yeah,
for a full.
yeah.
Yeah. And there's people that are charging more than that. You know what I
I
mean?
charge
It's like,
500.
yeah.
It's just
Okay,
because.
so I undercut you by five
Yeah,
bucks.
but
So.
that's not going to affect anything. That's kind of like, when you go into the diner and they go, "Yeah, we got the American chop suey, 14.95. We got the crab rangoons, they're 12.95." I
Yeah.
just don't. 95 thing doesn't doing it for me. You ever, you know what I'm talking about?
I'm the endless marketing. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I'm just keeping it clean. I'm $500. Just
yeah.
that's what it's going to cost you.
Okay, maybe I should do that. I'll say Mike told me to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so do whatever you want. It doesn't. I honestly don't think it matters. I think that
Yeah.
there's enough. I found that in guiding, what ends up happening is you create synergy with people. And you know this. You just there's certain people you like spending time with, and they
Yeah.
like spending time with you.
Yeah.
It's not always about being the best guide. It's more about finding that relationship that you can maintain because you want to keep that client as much and as long as you can.
Yeah.
It's like any other business. Getting new customers is really hard to do in
Yeah.
any business.
It is.
Retaining and maintaining your relationships with your clients that you've had for years is everything.
It is, and I think it comes down to listening. You know what I mean? Because it's like everybody wants something different out of the same experience, and you might have a way that you think that you do it. It's the same thing here with the yurts. We have people that come and they just want a place to sleep. That's it.
Yeah. You
They're
do
like,
it. This is beautiful here.
they're like, I just want a place to sleep and I want to go do something. And then you have the people that they come and they want to relax. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
And it's the same thing on the river. Not everybody comes because they want to catch 30 trout. They want to have an experience. They want to have the shore lunch. They want to have a nice, relaxing day. They want to learn about the river. They want to, it's an experience. And then you have some people that want to show up and they just want to,
Count numbers.
yeah,
I don't do well with those guys.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, I've actually had people come up to me and say, "I'm not interested in catching a bunch of 12-inch fish. I like to, be guided for trophy fish only."
mm,
Yeah, that's too hard to do. The
yeah,
expectation level is so unrealistic
yeah.
that, I mean, you can go out on any one of our major rivers in Maine and find trophy fish, but you can't guarantee that that fish is going to bite every fly that it sees.
No, no, you cannot. And I mean, in order to hunt like that for big fish, you have to have a client that is willing to not catch fish too. You know what I mean? Because it's a certain way that you got to do it,
I
and
agree.
it's definitely not a numbers game.
No.
It's definitely not a numbers game. But anyways, let's get back into the drift boats though, because I just am kind of curious the differences between the two designs that you're working on,
Yeah, yeah.
and like what you see them doing well,
Sure.
and why you guys are designing them the way you're designing them.
Right. Great question. So, thank you. There's always going to be a place in anywhere in the country, But in the Northeast, especially where you need to have that double ender, you've got a not really a double ender, but it's a pointy ended drift boat because you're going to want to try to run a little bit of white water.
Hmm.
Okay. And also, there's just something about the aesthetic of a pointed bow drift boat that really, like your boat, that's a beautiful boat. It's
Yeah.
fun to look at. You got a nice recurve line
Yeah.
on the gunnel. It's very aesthetic looking, right? I have a skiff now. So I have a 15-foot high Rocky Mountain skiff. It's very similar to their Montana skiff,
Hmm.
right? So it doesn't have a pointy bow. Well, what I've been looking at with curiosity is like adipose, as an example.
Yeah.
No, they didn't round out the bow. They just made the skiff wider. That's all they did.
It's very wide.
It's 58 inches wide at the
Yeah.
waterline. So
Yeah.
the skiff I'm building right now is 58 inches wide at the waterline, 15 feet long.
Hmm.
Okay. But more like the East Cape boats that you were talking about out of
Yeah.
Orlando, it has a round bow.
Yeah.
Where most of the skiffs have this real kind of chopped off, boxy end to it. The aesthetic doesn't work for me.
No, they are very ugly.
They're ugly, right?
They're ugly. Functional but ugly.
So a wide skiff. So what that means is less deflection into the water, so you can go over really shallow gravel bars.
Yeah.
The boat's going to be stable. You've got more walk-through room, and you have additionally larger area working space to put like rod storage, or under the deck to put like, everything you're going to need: coolers, net storage, extra oars, whatever you're going to have. So that storage is critical. And when you go down into a skiff, it gets cramped. So by making the boat wider, it really buys all that space back again. But yet, why would you not have a pointy bow? Well, the wind can get you. That's the whole idea.
Mhm.
And also, there's a lot of extra weight.
There is like and that's the thing, when you look at a boat that has a pointy bow, kind of like the boat that I have
Yeah.
now, that point, it aesthetically it's nice, and you can punch waves, like you said, if you get into rough going,
Yeah,
but there's a lot of boat that's just hanging out in the air there and it's not doing anything.
that's right.
It's doing nothing for you.
That's right. So I'm just trying to find that sweet spot between those two schools
Mhm.
of thinking when it comes to drift boats, of like the classic, I want to say Mackenzie River, but any wooden drift boat you'd see, it just has that continuous rocker look. None of these boats will have continuous rocker. They're both going to have that 4 to 5 foot
Yeah.
planar surface or flat surface, for the reasons that we already talked about,
Yeah.
performance.
Yeah.
And then the bow will be either a glorified, rounded for the skiff, or a point for the true drift
I'm
boat.
excited to see the rounded front on the skiff, because the um the East Cape drift that's out there, I don't know if you've looked at it.
Oh, a lot. I
Yeah.
studied it hard.
Um some of my friends, I couldn't go down because we had people at the yurts actually, but they went down to the Marlboro show.
Oh,
So
were they down there?
yeah, and they were there, so they took video of it and everything, and
Mhm.
were and the thing that was shocking when you saw it in person was the back is extremely, extremely shallow.
I look at that with concern,
Yeah.
because I've had many times, especially on the East Outlet, when we're running, over 3,000 cubic feet per second coming out of the dam, where, yeah, you're doing great. You recover from the wave in the front, but the wave coming off the back throws 5 gallon pail of water right into the back of the boat.
Yeah.
There's just as much problem with the back of the boat being small as
Yeah.
the bow of the boat being big.
Yeah.
I don't think they hit the mark with that.
I don't think they did. So John was there, and John asked them, and they said,
You're John?
yeah,
Yep.
yeah,
Yep. Okay.
who's not here today. He's
Yeah.
actually fishing in New York. So,
Good for him.
but he was there, and he asked them, and they said like class 2,
Yeah. Yeah.
and like you kind of gotta build a boat so that it can do a little more than that, because even in class 2 you can get in situations.
So Adipose really kind of did a great job, because they have what's called the runoff, which is
Mhm.
their big water boat, and
Mhm.
then they have the flow. And I'd say that the boat that I'm working, consulting with right now, it's kind of hitting right between the two of them.
Yeah,
It's low enough that it gets all the performance of not being affected by the wind, but yet it's wide enough that you can have all the storage, and yet you can still have enough whitewater action that you could take this skiff down
yeah.
the East Outlet. That's my goal.
I'm excited to row it when you guys get
Oh,
one.
you'll be
Like
in it.
I can't wait, because like my thing here in my use for a boat,
Mhm.
because I really now I used to get around. You know what I mean? But like I am pretty much held into this
Before you
area.
and Gretchen got together?
Well,
Oh, I didn't know that. Whoa.
what were we talking
I don't
about?
know. You were something about getting around. I get around, round, get around, I get around.
Yeah,
You get
yeah,
around. In other words, you fish different water. That's what you were
yes,
saying there.
yes. I did. I used to, yeah, I'd just go places, you know what I mean? And now I primarily am on the Androscoggin, and I just encounter so many low riffles, like just shallow riffles. So for me, even though the boat that I got from you that I have currently, it does do a pretty phenomenal job out
Yeah,
here, but a skiff would be just a little bit more fine tuned for my 90% of my use, where I would be able to skate across those like dead frog water areas a little bit better. And I would have a lower displacement when I'm in, these riffles that are only 6 inches deep. And actually, the rain event that we had in December of 2023 just really changed the whole structure of
it
the
did.
river up here, because
Yeah,
we had these long defined areas that we could get down through, and it just really kind of like pushed up the tailouts of the pools, and it just kind of equalized everything out. So like there's places where you could sneak through, you can't really sneak through now. I mean, you can get through, but you're going to hit.
yeah,
But like if I had a boat that drafted 2 or 3 inches less,
hmm,
it would be very nice.
yeah. Well, 58 wide is pretty wide.
It's pretty wide,
That's
yeah.
as wide as it gets right now.
Yeah,
For
because I think the boat I have is 56,
yep,
but it also doesn't have as flat of a profile. But
yeah,
now, so what about rod storage? So that's the big thing. So I gotta say, like, so talking about the adipose and Hyde's Montana skiff, which is kind of like a mini flow adipose flow, kind
yep,
of in a lot of regards.
yep,
I just love the tray rod storage that
totally.
they have in it. I love
Yep,
it because I don't like sticking rods into tubes. It just gets complicated,
that's right.
and I just love just the idea of just being able to pick the rod up and go.
Totally. Yep.
Yeah,
And Adipose does it best.
yeah,
They have basically offsetting, so the guy in the front can put a rod on the same side as the guy in the back, but they're facing in the different direction.
right.
So
They
my
they each got their reel on their end of the boat.
That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
yeah.
And so if you make the rod storage correctly, you can have two rods on the left or three or even four if you have the room to do it. It's really where the reel's going to land.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's not the rod that takes up the space, it's the reels.
yeah.
And then what Hyde does, as you know, is they make it so that they make like a little indentation down into the side where the reel goes. And I think I'm going to stay away from that. I'm going to make it just sit down on its
That's
side
right.
and
Yeah.
then put some foam, trying to think of the name of the term for the,
C deck.
yeah, C-Deck, exactly,
Yeah,
type
yeah,
product.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
million products
There
out
is.
there
Yeah.
now. There's a couple that are really well made that have like a diamond pattern.
Hmm.
We're going to be using that, I think. And
I've seen guys even drill up through, and then they put, like the rubber gear tie twisties,
totally.
and they just have those up through, and you can even twist them down and trailer the boat with them, and
Yeah, so you got it over the fighting butt or over the real aspect of the
yeah,
rod. Yeah, that's a great idea. And then it's
yeah.
just right there.
Yeah, and then on the other end, what goes over the reel or the handle or whatever also goes over the tip from the other rod. So
Yep.
like they're kind of like locked in. I mean, I do trailer with my rods in
Hmm.
at times, but I Hyde's new uh rod storage that they have is a huge improvement from what I have. That's the single tube
Yeah.
that they had, like the fabric
Yeah.
liner that went in, and as you know, just everything always gets caught in it, and it's hard to get it out. And even if you did have two rods, the reels didn't really sit that well
No.
inside the little reel tray that they had.
No.
And I was like, if I'm keeping this boat, I'm just gonna cut this stuff out and just like make my own fiberglass setup and change it up. And what was funny is I've been talking about it for years and haven't done it.
Yeah.
But what Hyde came out with is what I said I was gonna end up doing, which now they have three smaller tubes, so each rod just has its own tube to go in, and the reel tray is just much wider now.
Yeah.
So I guess you can put three going forward and three going back now.
So have you seen their Yeti boat, that brown boat on their website?
Yeah,
Is that the boat you're talking about? Because they
yeah,
have the storage on that.
yeah.
That's a really that is a tip to the hat to Adipose. That's them saying, we are going to steal all of your ideas and make them just a little bit different.
Yeah.
But the one part they didn't get right is they didn't make it 58 inches wide at the bottom.
No, they didn't. That's 54 inches,
I
I think
know.
there, yeah.
That's what my Montana skiff is. And it
And
just
and
sits
and
in
y
the
and
you
yours is a little, if I remember right, the difference between is yours the Rocky Mountain skiff, or is it
mine's
the
a Rocky Mountain
Okay,
skiff,
so yeah, so that has a little bit more of a traditional back end that kind of tapers up and gets a little narrower. The Montana skiff has a little bit of a wider back end on it, I think.
It may. I don't know for
Yeah.
certain, but I can tell you that it has more to do with rod storage. On the Montana skiff, it has compartments that open up like this, and then on mine, it has the same rod storage that you have in
Yeah.
your boat, but it's maybe a little bit different than yours. I'd have to remember what the way that yours was configured, but those little nylon socks they put in there and that they're held on with a zip tie. You just take your Leatherman, you cut that zip tie, you grab that thing and pull it out and
Yeah.
put a piece of PVC in there or something that because when I nymph
Yeah.
fish, I would constantly get either the stonefly or the
Oh,
dropper
it's terrible.
stuck in that sock, and you've got a $700 sage rod there, and you're sitting there crying, "Come on, give it out."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's terrible. I saw the other day somebody actually took like two pieces of PEX actually fit perfect in there.
Perfectly. Yep.
So I'll probably end up going that route this summer.
Which is just plumbing PVC.
Yeah.
PEX. Yep.
Yeah.
The red and the blue stuff.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, for sure. But so you talked on the skiff though. So, but your other one that you're gonna have that's gonna be more
Yep.
traditional.
It's going to look a lot like your boat that you have now. So your boat is 16 to 17 feet long, I want to say.
I think it's 16 feet long and like 56 wide.
Yep.
Yeah, I
Yep.
think.
So this one's going to be 15 feet long. It'll be 58 wide,
Yeah,
and it'll have the same, I say recurve, but the line on the gunnel that you have on your boat is a great aesthetic,
yeah.
and it's also really functional.
It is very
Because
functional.
what happens is the person entering the boat, either in the bow or in the stern, doesn't have to step over a full size gunnel to get in and out of the boat. It's
Mm,
actually a safety issue. But yet, if you kept that same line all the way back to where the oar locks are, you wouldn't be able to get your oars out of the water because your oar locks are too low and you keep slamming
yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
So by raising up the oar locks, but the way that the competitors have been doing it is they make this really ugly, just it goes straight up, over, down, back, forward again, like the Contender.
yeah,
I mean, to me, it's like having a girlfriend with a broken nose or
yeah,
something. It just
yeah,
doesn't look right,
yeah. It's out of place.
it doesn't look right. So I think that there's always room for improvement, and that's a place where I think that recurve will look well. So I'm kind of be a little more like a clackacraft in terms of its traditional shape,
Yeah,
but it'll have that hide gunnel line to
yeah,
it. All walk-through design. The skiff and the drift boat will be almost identical in terms of construction because if you're thinking about getting into boat building, you don't want to have 75 different parts that you're having to build things into a mold. Isn't it nice if you can reach and say, this is what we're going to use for the casting deck in the front?
yeah,
This is what we're going to use for the rower's box in the middle,
yeah,
right? Because you do need to have storage. I mean, there, like I carry a barbecue grill. We're going to have a short lunch. So I
hmm
need a place to put that and and like what you've done with your boat, you've put Yeti coolers in the
hmm
front.
yeah. In the front, I did have one in the back, but now I've actually moved back to the pedestals.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's nice to have be able to put your feet underneath you.
Yeah, but that kind of just changed because our use changed a little bit because we acquired a piece of property on the Andro.
Right.
So like now, like with the family, like we go out and we dry fly fish or catch some browns on emergers for 2 hours in the evening
Hmm.
or maybe 2 hours in the morning. Whereas before when we didn't have that and the kids were younger, I mean we'd go out for 10 hours on the river. And so I needed a lot of food and snacks.
Yeah. So the cooler helped.
The cooler help, but now it's like, yeah, now I do like a soft cooler in the boat.
Yep.
And I don't have any hard coolers in there at all, and I like having the space. But and I think also there's been a transition from like fishermen that
Hmm.
everybody's got their boat bag.
Well, that's, probably we had this conversation in my driveway when you were buying your boat that I really lean in the direction of simplicity. I used to get sold by Clackercraft and Hyde both that you need to have all this storage because
Hmm.
out west sometimes they do multi-day trips, right? And that's where you need folding chairs and you need to
Right.
have a roll-up table, and I still carry those things with me. But they might have a tent, they might have
Yeah.
we in the Northeast are, I mean, 8 hours, maybe nine at the most,
Yeah.
and you're done.
You're done.
And so during that time, you need one meal, drinks for the whole time, ice to
Yeah.
last that whole amount of time. And so I use a soft cooler for the food, soft
Yeah.
cooler for the drinks, and I have all sorts of room to walk around.
So you do the same thing.
I just want it to be very unsophisticated.
Yeah, I do too, and I also like it that way because then when you do like we drag my boat into some hairy places.
Yeah,
And it's like if you're doing like you're going with the guys and you know you're going to take the boat somewhere that's pretty difficult, it's nice to have it light.
exactly.
Like weight is it's a big thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's a really big thing. And I know like East Cape, that's the thing that they've been selling their boat on is weight. And it's like carbon fiber, I think.
No,
And
it's definitely infused.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's but it's like what did they say? Completely rigged. I think it was only 300 pounds, which is extremely light.
Yeah.
But a lot of the way that they made it light is there's a lot of things in there that can snag line. You know, like they have like their seats are like a 4 pedestal
Yeah.
seat that
Don't like
touches
that.
down and it's got a turnbuckle in the
I know.
middle. And I saw that and I'm like, oh, everybody's line's just going to wrap around that.
The other way that they were able to save on weight is there is no side storage. They just have side storage racks. So it's almost like in a canoe, you'd create something that you could set your rod down into, and then the
Yeah.
tip is kind of maintained by this other
And
aspect.
all I saw was broken rods when I saw that. I don't know about you, but
That's all I saw too, because that's what happens if you have the tip of the rod or by the bow of the boat. All it's going to take is my English setter.
yeah.
My English setter is going to say, "Time to get in the boat. Dad's getting in the boat." You can break as many rods as you want.
Yeah.
So you do have to, and that's the other thing about having a platform is even if a dog steps on a rod like this, oops, sorry about all the noise.
Yeah, that's fine.
If a dog steps on the rod like this, it's not necessarily broken.
Yeah.
But if it's just
The
like,
tip.
yeah,
Well, and I just have thought of, I mean, I've had so many people have a good little slip getting into the drift boat. You know, it
yeah.
happens all the time. I mean, you know, even if you're well equipped with the right footwear and everything, yeah, it happens. You're stepping from a wet, slippery surface to what is probably a wet, slippery surface. You know what I mean? Like it's going to happen. You're going to have people slip.
And it's just like the classic YouTube videos you see of someone standing on a dock and then they go to put one foot on the boat and the boat starts moving away from them and then they fall in inevitably, right?
Yeah.
That happens in drift boats, getting into drift boats. One of the things that I teach in guiding in rowing is when people are getting in and out of the boat, help them in.
Yeah.
You know, don't take for granted that just because the guy's 24 years old, he's going to just grasshopper right into the
Right.
boat, you know, because the boat can move away from anybody.
Yeah.
And so I always hold the boat up against a shoreline or up against something or even against me just so it won't move anywhere when they transition. Because as you know, when people get into a drift boat, the whole thing kind of,
It does.
you know.
Well, and you know, some of us are big.
and some of us are small.
Is definitely true. Well, yeah, we're at about an hour and
Wake up.
yeah.
Wake up. It's coming to an end.
I appreciate I could talk to you forever about this. I really could. And I think that we need to have you back on though when you have had one of these in the water.
Yeah, we can do that for sure.
I
And we can
think-
talk, we can get your impression of it
Yeah,
too.
I think it would be a great thing to share with, you know, all the listeners and watchers, you know, like how this translated, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what your impressions are of it. And I mean, I'm so excited. I think that you guys are really filling a need, you know what I mean? Like it's huge because like right now I think the stealth craft is in Michigan.
Yep.
And then you have high country boats down in Tennessee, way down in Tennessee, and they do a limited amount of boats down there, but that's
And then I think there's another company called Blue Ribbon down there that's making them
Yeah.
high density polyethylene.
Yep. And
Which-
that's a skiff I think they make.
It
Yes.
is.
Yep.
But they're
So-
all 20 grand.
Yeah.
And our goal is to make the Model T and they're all in white.
Yeah.
If you want to put graphics on it like you did
Yeah.
with your boat,
Do it.
you can get it, you know, you dipped yours the first time, didn't you?
I did. I plasti dipped it.
Yeah.
I ended up with 18 cans of plasti dip for free. And so I went that route. And it's held up good. It's been like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
And but I think it's smart to do it that way though, because the thing is with vinyl, it's like you just take it off.
I know.
You know what I mean? And like
Yeah.
if you want to wrap, if you want to do a full wrap on a boat, it's actually protective at that point too.
Yeah.
You know, for the gel. So like I that's awesome.
Yep. And
So what is your interior color going to be? Now I'm going back. I'm diving backwards now. But like, so what's the interior color is
it
going to
can
be?
be any color we want it to be.
Yeah.
We're still playing with that right now. The thing you need to stay away from with drift boats, really with any boat that you're out in the sun, is really bright colors like white,
Yeah.
because it's very tiring on your eyes.
Yeah.
And so that's why all of the drift boat companies up until this point have done kind of that splatter paint on the
Mm,
inside. So you not only do you have a light color, but you also have a texture, so you can get a sense
yeah,
of the depth of what you're looking at. You can see how far away you are from that gunnel on a bright day.
yeah,
But I mean, I'm a big powder blue, baby blue guy.
yeah.
Um, I
That would be different.
different. That would be
Yeah.
different. I don't like. I call it baby calf shit brown. You know what I mean?
I do.
I don't like that. I like grays probably. I've never
Yeah.
had a boat that was brown. I've always had boats that were usually like a sage green interior
Yeah. That's
or
nice. That would be nice. I know it's such a hard balance because I went into this with the top deck of my skiff
yeah.
because it was like I didn't want it white for the same reasons you were saying because everything that I read and they're like you're just gonna your eyes are gonna just explode and but yet you don't want it to be dark because then it gets hot
Yeah, yeah,
you
yeah.
know
You
and,
and
and
if you carry dogs in your boat, you can have a dark boat.
no and so like you got to kind of bridge that
Yeah.
gap. I went with like a super subtle light tan. I wish that I had gone darker.
Mm.
um it's still a little bit bright on my eyes.
Just to clarify, you're talking about your striper boat,
My striper boat,
right?
yes, my polling skiff.
We've said skiff a few times.
Yes,
Just want to for
not my trout, not a trout skiff.
right.
Yes, 100%. But I think baby blue would be that like a light
Yeah.
blue. That would be neat.
Yep.
That
Yeah.
would actually be very that would be very classic and almost kind of Lavro like from back in the day. You'd see a lot of them that were like
Yes.
white with the baby blue and
Yes. Or even, maybe a little peachy or orange color like
yeah,
that on a white hull would look really sharp.
it would.
Or you could do like the leg stands and would be just one color,
Mm,
whatever color you wanted.
yeah,
Gel coat, you can change the color of gel coat just like you can change Benjamin Moore paint or
yeah,
Sherwin-Williams paint or anything like that.
yeah.
Sky's the limit.
Man, now I have more questions, but I said that we were gonna stop, so we're gonna have to stop. But anyway, so it's been decided. Mike's gonna come back, and we're gonna talk about this boat when it gets both of them once they
Yeah.
get time in the water and
Yeah, this summer's going to be about testing
yeah
and deciding what we like, what we don't like, what works, what doesn't work, and we're going to need to get as much feedback from people, yourself included.
yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah, because once the hull is made and the mold is made, which we're getting close to now, it really comes down to the interior layout and what that real estate looks like. And if we can, make it minimalistic. As an example, if you can buy a seat, then you don't have to make a seat,
Right.
right? So that's one less thing that you have to inventory
Mm.
or fabricate or take into
Yeah,
consideration
I mean,
building
yeah,
costs.
and like especially if you're doing like molded fiberglass bases and stuff like that,
Right.
those are just more molds and
Yes. So we're trying to figure out how we can save the consumer money to try to hit that price point somewhere around $10,000 to $12,000 with a trailer.
I think you guys would do great at that price. I
Yep.
mean, you're crushing the competition and people don't have to deal with, it's a big headache having to deal with freight to get your boat out here and just I have not shipped a drift boat, but I have shipped other large products across country and the damages and the headaches
Yeah.
and it's a horror show.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for all those years that I was working with Clackacraft and Hyde, we'd have to have 18 wheelers come.
Mm,
And sometimes they'd say, you're not going to see your boat for 6 months
yeah.
because they can't just send a truck with one boat on it. They have to wait till they sell a half dozen and then they
Mhm.
load the trailer and it goes. So you're kind of at mercy of their availability to ship.
Right.
Where now, if we're making them in New England, come on down.
Come on down. Yeah, it's like car shopping. Yeah, I mean, that's the exciting point is like if
Mm.
it's done and you like get to just go there.
Yeah,
You
bring
know,
your 2-inch ball and
yeah, and bring it home.
yep,
Yeah.
that's the idea.
All right. Well, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on, Mike.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks. Good luck with your podcast. And
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
think I don't know if we said it, but I think there's a lot of room for cross pollination. Like I think a lot of people who are listening to my podcast, it's a certain demographic. Maybe people that are a little more history interested. Interested in hearing some of the older guides in Maine. But I've always thought there was room for talking about time, tricks,
Mhm.
gear reviews, like you're doing.
Yeah.
Go run like a boy through
Yeah.
a field.
I know. I wish that we had more time. We covered so much in so much time. I wish we could have gotten into more of like your tying tactics and maybe next time you'll have to bring a favorite fly, and we'll do it on the vise with you.
Oh, no problem at all. Yeah,
Yeah.
happy to do it.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
guys. Yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks.